Okay, this is the video on populations and sampling. Alright, you're looking at page 2 of your booklet. This is research booklet 2, and we're looking at this target population. What do we mean by that? Right, this is what you need to highlight. Target population is the whole group of individuals from which the sample is drawn. Okay, so the whole group from which the sample is drawn. So if you're using family and college students, we would be saying students at Fram College is our target population, and we would take a sample of students from there. Okay, so target population would be all the pupils from family and college. Okay, now the thing is that obviously you wouldn't be able to use all the students; it would just be too big a group. So we just pick a sample. You sample. What's really important about your sample? Ideally, it should be representative. Okay, in other words, all the characteristics that are displayed in your what we call the parent population down here are actually represented in your sample. Alright, so that means for Fram College students you would want years 9 to 13, you would want, therefore, all age groups, you would want all houses represented, you want perhaps all different nationalities, boys and girls, etc., etc. So you'd want a representative group. If it isn't, then obviously we can't generalize to the population as a whole. We would be saying that those results are only applicable to a certain group in that population, a certain group of Fram College students, and yet we're trying to say that our results apply to all Fram College students. Okay, the other thing is that we want to avoid this word here, bias. So ideally you are going to randomly select, and I'll explain what that is in a moment, but it basically means everybody in that target population has an equal chance of being selected for the sample. Okay, and we need that because we don't want to bias results. We don't want to handpick people. Okay. Let's have a look at the different sampling styles, different sampling techniques now. So if you look further down or turn over to the next page, okay, we're going to look at this. How do we actually randomly select? We're going to look at these different examples in a moment, but first of all, how do we randomly select? Okay, now in truth, actually, that might be quite tricky because basically you need to be able to number everybody in that population. So you need to be able to identify them really with a name or a number, and then put them into some sort of system where you can literally raffle them, as it were. So two things we could talk about. We could put all of the names of the Fram College students into a hat, or we could number them all and put all the numbers in a hat and then randomly pick out. Right, so just literally get some sort of system, something like a raffle to pick out a certain number, however many you needed. And in the exam you would need to say the 50 students or however many they are requiring you to pick. That's one system. Or you can put all of the names, allocate all the names a number, and get some computerized system to randomly select numbers, and you'd match those up with the names, and those would be the people that you would put in your sample. So in truth, it could be actually quite laborious, could be quite time consuming. It just depends on what your target population is really. Okay, but that's how we would do it, and that question does come up quite a bit in exam papers. Let's have a look at these sampling methods now. Okay, so again, you've got page references for your AS text, 108 to 110. I've referred to other separate documents which we will make available on Firefly, but I'm basically going to talk through them now. So just pause when you're ready. Pause when you need to, and just make a note of some of these points in the boxes. So we'll start with number 1, random sampling. Random sampling, definition you need. Definition is that everybody from the target population has an equal chance of being selected for the sample. Okay, so there is no bias. That basically everybody has an equal chance, but we should be saying everybody in the target population. So what is good about that? What's the strength of that? Well, the key strength is there is no bias. What do we mean by that? It means that I haven't handpicked this person or that person to go in my particular condition A or condition B. Alright, it's completely random, so there is no bias. and we are avoiding any researcher bias. That's got to be a good thing, because obviously that can confound results, that can spoil our results. The weakness of random sampling, though, a couple of things. First of all, you can write that if there are lots of people in your target population, then actually this could be time consuming, because you've got to somehow allocate everybody a number, put them in a system, and then select them. So that could be time consuming. We also have problems. For example, it may be that somebody on that list, somebody who has been chosen, is not available or refuses to take part. They don't want to be part of it. So that could be a little bit of a problem as well. And actually, one thing that does sometimes occur is, even though it's random, it does not necessarily mean that you've got a representative sample. So sometimes it could be quite an uneven sample. So it could be just by pure fluke, randomness, we have selected more males or no males or no females, okay, or nobody from a different country, or no year 9s or whatever. Okay, so that can be a weakness as well. That can be a problem, that you're actually getting an unrepresentative group. Okay, the second one is stratified sampling. Right, you might want to pause this from time to time to get the definition down. This one is a bit more wordy, and I'll explain why now. So stratified is, first of all, you divide your target population into strata, into subgroups, strata or subgroups. So for example, it might be that we know that we've got year 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s in the school. So you would use those as possibly your different strata, or you might use houses. Okay, but you subdivide them. That's the first thing you do. Secondly, you then calculate what proportions of those people you have in your target population. So how many year 9s, how many year 10s there are in the school, right, in your target population. And then from that, you therefore calculate how many of those groups you want, how many from each strata you want in your sample. Okay, so for example, if we've got, let's say, 10% of the school are year 9s, that means 10% of your sample should be year 9s. Okay, do you get that? And then thirdly, the really important thing for this definition, we have to randomly select from that strata. Once you've calculated how many you need, you randomly select from that strata for your sample. So it is very wordy to describe, and it's probably the most complicated from that respect, but actually it's a very good one to use, and we'll explain why. I expect hopefully you've worked out the strength. The strength is, of course, you are going to get a very representative sample, probably the best, the most representative sample you could have. So that's a real strength for it, a real advantage. Another strength could be that you could say that it's a very objective measure. You're not being subjective. You're not specifically picking people. So really, again, because you're randomly selecting them at the third stage of that process, there is no bias in it. Okay, so that's a good thing as well. I'm sure you can guess what the weakness is. So if you just want to pause, what do you reckon the weakness is? The weakness is that it's very time consuming doing all that calculating. Okay, and then you've still got to randomly select, and then some of them possibly might say that they don't want to take part. So it is quite a hefty process, and that is the real weakness. But possibly if you've got the time, the strengths definitely outweigh the weakness. Okay, and then moving on to opportunity sampling. We've got two here. We've got opportunity, and we've also got self-selecting, or otherwise known as volunteer sampling. These are very different, and I don't want you to confuse them. Okay, so let's have a look at the definition of opportunity sampling. Okay, opportunity sampling. Definition. Basically, most texts say that we're selecting people who are around and available at the time that you want to do the experiment. I would also add on to that who are willing to take part. Okay, so that's kind of suggested anyway, if they're available but those around available and willing to take part. That's how we would define it. Obviously the strength of that is it is very convenient. It's very quick and convenient. Sometimes people see that it's economical, and we could argue that, but I've seen in some mark schemes they don't like that very much. So say that it's quick and convenient, because you are literally just asking whoever's around, and they may be your mates or whatever, so it's, you know, it's relatively easy, but we would say quick and convenient. Those are the terms you want. Obviously the weakness of that though is that you are going to get a biased sample. The people who are willing, you know, the people who are around at the time might well be people you know. There may be a certain type of group, you know, all pensioners out on a little outing, so they're all the same sort of people. It may be that they are your mates, or they're people who are very happy to help, you know, more helpful people. So you are definitely going to get a biased sample. It won't necessarily be representative of other populations. And finally, the definition for self-selecting or volunteer sample. Okay, this consists of those people, those individuals, who have consciously or unconsciously determined their own involvement, taken part, whether they know it or not, they have volunteered. So it could be as obvious as you putting up a list and saying, I need 10 volunteers tonight in prep to help me with my experiment. So it could be as obvious as that, or it could be just that you are doing an experiment like the Pilivin one on a subway, and the people who get involved stop and help the stranger. Could be, you know, they are actually volunteering their help, and therefore they have volunteered into the experiment without them realizing. So we can have either of those scenarios. Okay, so they could just be passers-by who become involved in a field study, or they could be people who deliberately put themselves up and said, yeah, I'm happy to help with that. So, as you can imagine, what's great about this is, you know, it is convenient. Again, it's fairly quick, it's convenient, and to some extent, if they've volunteered themselves, then it's useful in terms of consent. They volunteered, you know, they have actually given their consent. The problem with it, obviously, is though you're going to get unrepresentative samples. Could be biased again, because again we might have a particular group who've selected themselves. They may be just particularly helpful people, etc., etc. And actually, I'd like you to just tag on down here another one that could be referred to, which is actually a systematic sample. Systematic. Okay, it is in your textbooks on page 108, systematic sampling. And all a systematic sample is that you are selecting every nth person, so every 10th person or every 6th person on a particular list. Okay, so you could, again, if we took all the students from Fram College, put them on a list, then we take every 10th one, something like that. Okay, obviously you are going to possibly get a biased sample, okay, because it's not as random. I mean, you could actually bias it, is what I mean. You could select which way that list is written. Is it alphabetical? Is it in year group? You know, is it gender-based? Whatever. And therefore you could actually, it's not as random as it sounds, you could bias it in a certain way. So we have got that possibility. And also, you know, that again, it could be unrepresentative. It could be a freak sample, that even every nth one could end up being a certain type of person. One could argue that there isn't any, you know, if you are doing it completely randomly, or that you could argue that you aren't deliberately selecting them, but there is a bias in the way that you have written the list in the first place. So your textbook says as a strength it avoids bias, but we need to be wary of that, because it depends on how the list, and presumably the experimenter, is pulling up that list. Okay, so strength is that you should get a representative sample, but actually a systematic is very similar to random, okay, with the strengths and weaknesses. Now, sampling as a topic comes up over and over again in your research methods papers. Okay, I would say the majority of papers have a question somewhere on there about sampling. It's very, very common. So you do need to know how to define them, and also what a strength, at least one strength and one weakness, to be able to explain. So again, using our little format, you identify the problem and you explain it. All right, make sure you've got both parts you can do. Identify and name the problem, as it were, bias or unrepresentative or something like that, and then explain what you mean and why that is. Often they will also ask you to, if it's for extra marks, they'll ask you to be applying it to that specific study, so watch out for that. Try to always link it to that particular research that they've told you about, because often the second mark or even the third mark is actually for that application. So try and always get in the habit of saying why it applies to that particular research.